Welcome, everybody, tonight. Thank you for being here on a wonderful Sunday, which is raining in California. My name is Dr. Diana Londoño. I'm a urologist in Los Angeles, and I'm the founder of physiciancoachsupport.com, which is a platform that hosts these monthly meetings and events with physicians. And the whole purpose of these meetings is to have a place to discuss some topics, to have tools, ideas, companies that could hopefully help us as physicians in any way. Whether it's talking about movement, about meditation, about, again, tools, companies that can help us be more efficient, or just sometimes even just learning more about ourselves so that we can realize, you know, some of the gifts we have are our strengths, our gifts, and we can learn to just really love ourselves and not hide parts of ourselves to really thrive. Because I think sometimes when we hide or shy away from some of our personality traits that maybe brought us to medicine, it can really cause a disconnect and really start getting us to burnout, which is what we want to prevent, avoid, help, or help you get out of and stay well, because physicians are definitely hurting in many reasons, many shapes and forms. So today I wanted to change it up a little bit and really just talk about the self, the person, and some of the traits. And these traits we want to discuss today are being an empath and being an introvert. And so I couldn't think of a better person than my really dear friend, who I'm so grateful for today. And we have some great guests too, to really talk about what is an empath, what is an introvert, superficially, not in the big Jungian thing, but just really how would we describe it, and what are some things we can do to, honor it, protect it, and realize we may feel or see the world a little differently than maybe our colleagues. Only about 20% of people are empaths. So, it may be different than the majority. So, Jillian, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. I'm so grateful you're here. I really appreciate all your support. And I just want to take a minute for you to maybe just introduce yourself a little bit. Who are you? Where are you? And that way you can share with our guests, a little more about you.
Well, thank you so much, Diana. I am so excited to be here. I've had the opportunity to join you on some of these events, and I love what you've created with the physician coach support, such a needed resource and an important resource for physicians right now. So, yes, my name is Jillian. I have a background in dentistry and medicine with a specialty in oral medicine, and I work in radiation oncology as a research fellow currently. And I am a certified life and leadership coach. I coach physicians and I coach within a large cancer institution. And as we'll be talking about today, I do classify myself as an introvert, and I relate to the highly sensitive person and in being called an empath.
Yeah, and how would you really define? I mean, they're not all introverts are empaths, because there's some, extroverts are empaths. So, but a lot of empaths are introverts. But how would you define an introvert? Like, how would you say, you would define one? And I know everybody has their own definition, and
Yeah.
but for the self, for you, how would you define it?
And there's that whole spectrum, right? There's like the extroverted introvert, introverted introvert, and introverted extrovert, whatever it is. Is just this
And the ambivert.
spectrum, right? The spectrum. But really, for me, superficially, it's do you get energy when you're around a whole lot of people, or does that drain you? Right? To say it in a very distinct way. And I think back to when I was in dental school, and like everybody couldn't wait until Friday so then they could go out to the bar. And like until this day, I'm like, Friday is the most exhausting day I've ever had. I could not imagine going out on a Friday. And it's the things that you like to do to recharge you. A lot of times introverts, they like solitude, where people who are extroverted, they feel discomfort in that and they really want to be out with people. And introverts tend to like to recharge doing reading or things that are really more internalizing. And extroverts like they're talking and vivacious. So if you're in a meeting and someone's talking very charismatic, we think that's often an extrovert or a trained introvert that has learned how to use their voice, whereas introverts tend to be absorbing and processing and observing.
Yeah, and I love how you said that, trained introvert, because I think, we also, even though we're going to talk about these are some characteristics, I think we also You don't have to kind of hold on to it. You can change with time, you can learn some skills, you kind of can be very fluid in where you are. Just because this is how you sort of experience the world doesn't mean it doesn't change. Just like if you're a morning person, you actually can change and be a night person. It can change with time, even with hormones, with a lot of things. But it can be a fluid thing and you can learn some skills. So I love that you said that you could be a trained or learned um, introvert. And yes, most of the introverts tend to, prefer, maybe smaller settings and maybe do not like small talk that sort of kind of kills or erodes their soul, and a lot of extroverts, maybe be louder, the life of the party and can small talk everywhere. And, it's not good or bad. It's just different. And there's nothing wrong with small talk. I mean, maybe there's definitely a place for it. But if you realize, you feel kind of drained by a lot of people. Fridays are a day that you don't feel like so charged up. I mean, Monday is like your strong day. That just may be something that could be helpful. So I appreciate how you sort of relate to it and how you explained that.
And I think we need to touch base on that. Like, it's not being shy and it's not having social anxiety disorder. Like, there's some things that people think like, oh, an introvert is just like super shy person. Or like, for me to be around a lot of people, I'm not super anxious and paranoid about what they're thinking. Like, I have normal human, like, oh, this person probably doesn't like me. They think, all the self-critical talk. But I'm not going to have an anxiety attack when I'm out. And so those are different things.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier, about different books, and I know you mentioned one of the books that you really like. What's the book that you said you liked?
For
Yeah.
introverts, Quiet by Susan Cain is a good book, but for highly sensitive people, and as you were saying earlier, highly sensitive people, according to Dr. Elaine Aron's work, it's 15 to 20% of the population, and of those people, about 30% are actually extroverts. So even though the majority of the people that are highly sensitive are introverts, there are some extroverts that would classify themselves as highly sensitive. And I'm not a huge person with labels, but I use them to help us understand our traits. And also, I really resonated with Elaine Aron's book. It's The Highly Sensitive Person, How to Thrive When the World Overwhelms You. And that book was eye-opening to me because I learned, just as many other people have learned, is that sensitivity is a weakness and it should be hidden and you should be ashamed of it. And I did everything in order to hide that part of myself. And that's why we're having this discussion today, is to learn how to leverage it as a gift and to see how you may have been shamed for it and told to just grow thicker skin, or especially for men who've been socialized not to show emotions, especially tearing up, and told to just man up, and how harmful that can be. And if we've been judged for being highly sensitive, it can really impact our self-esteem. And highly sensitive people, there's a lot of talk about narcissistic personality disorder and traits right now. And empaths and highly sensitive people tend to be givers and have an energy that people can take from. And sometimes they can get into these relationships where people who aren't so healthy and have narcissistic traits can feed off of the empath. And so identifying your traits, how you show up in the world, and where your thoughts about that situate you in your self-worth. Because if you understand that, then you can understand why you might be getting into certain relationships or accepting certain jobs.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that book is helpful because, yeah, you can kind of, I think the first step is just awareness. Like, what is it first? Who are you? Like, what are your sort of traits? And then how are you relating or others are relating to you? And maybe, yeah, feeding off your energy. I was talking earlier about, I mean, this is another book, Judy Orloff, MD, who's a psychiatrist. This one's called the Empath Survival Guide. And she has some questions that I think are helpful to try to realize, like, are you an empath or not? And she kind of even describes it as a physical or emotional empath. And what she means by that is, if you ask yourself some questions, like if you're sitting around somebody's having physical pain and you sort of start feeling that pain yourself in your body, that might be a sign that you're like a physical empath. You pick up that physical energy or pain. Um, if you sort of start feeling just depleted, if you are in big crowds like airports or stadiums, and you start just kind of feeling maybe anxious or uncomfortable, and again, not because you have social anxiety, but just because you just start feeling it, it just may not be your anxiety. I mean, airports, I think, are very difficult places if you're an empath because people are sad, they're excited, they're worried. All these interactions are happening. And when you're highly sensitive, you actually start sort of feeling it. And again, it may not be yours, and it's not about being antisocial or anxious person. It's just you pick it up. So if you notice that in big crowds, and then you leave and you kind of feel back to sort of normal, that may be a sign. Also, you start sort of craving sugars or getting addictions or doing behaviors to sort of try to cope. And that's what we'll talk about, a little bit later when we maybe are shamed by how we feel, like what behaviors we start doing and why that, is really important to realize how we're trying to cope with it. And again, just really realizing, they can really be gifts, and especially in medicine, being observant of what's happening, kind of reading that room of energy, it really is a gift. So I do want to talk about, once you kind of learn more about, you know, I am highly sensitive. This is how I relate to the world. You know, what started happening perhaps for you personally when others started telling you maybe some of those things like grow thicker skin, or maybe
Mm.
this is not the right job for you or the right position because you are labeled a certain way. So what were your sort of ways you dealt with maybe external factors, external people telling you, you know, not knowing perhaps in their own, with their own bias and their own traumas and their own healings they had to do, but, whether it was family or friends or coworkers.
Yeah, first, for anyone that's highly sensitive and their family didn't realize and nourish that or nurture that, that's where Dr. Gabor Mate talks a lot about childhood trauma, you not getting what you needed, and somebody that's highly sensitive needed to be supported in order to process those deeper emotions and to have an outlet that could look like creative outlet such as art or music or writing or whatever allowed them to feel their emotions, where I didn't have that understanding. So when I was younger, and if I would tear up and that would elicit a negative response from a family member, then I would shut it all in and internalize it. And I went to go be an Air Force oral maxillofacial surgeon because I wanted this persona that I was this badass that people wouldn't touch. So therefore, they wouldn't think of me as sensitive. So it was that outer shell because I perceived that being overwhelmed, overstimulated, very sensitive, and in tune with emotions was negative. And so I didn't leverage it and ask myself, well, what would I need in order to thrive and to cultivate this, what I now perceive for all who have sensitivity as a gift in order to help heal? Because I love spending time with my patients and getting to know them and understanding their emotions. But I didn't have the tools and the capacity to process that. So I blunted it. And you talked about addictions, and mine was anorexia. It just, I internalized and I numbed. And that's why it's important to understand how to utilize your sensitivity as a gift and also to ask yourself, what do I need? So we were talking about uh, being overstimulated in a crowd of people, but
Mhm.
right now, and we'll go into like how to improve use of social media and interact like TV and your surroundings in order to really optimize your capacity to thrive. Because if you're highly sensitive, you watch TV. TV has commercials. Commercials have marketing that's emotionally manipulative. You're going to probably feel like shiitake. So audit your energy and see like, okay, after I watched this, I felt a certain way. Or if you're watching something violent, if you're watching the news, they really cater to the fear response and the anxiety, and anxiety is contagious for anybody. And so just try to process like, after I do this certain thing, I feel worse. And sometimes empaths, when they feel a certain way, they actually meet their internal input with what they're already feeling. So if I'm feeling really crappy, I might engage in things that actually reinforce that rather than learn that you can be at peace and you can feel safe. And it took a lot of intentions for me to shift how I show up in the world, because the natural state of being is very chaotic, very high paced, and we're taught to be type A and value that. We're taught to be high paced and value that. And we're on social media we're taught to want to be engaging all the time and to want to be connected all the time. And for the introvert and for the highly sensitive people, that's going to be extremely energy consuming and you will lose yourself.
Yeah, maybe we'll kind of go into that because knowing you in a way, I was a little shocked when you told me I'm an introvert. I'm like, what do you mean? You're on social media all the time. I mean, you know
Yeah.
so many people. You did a TEDx talk, and to me that's like surprising in a way. And so, yes, when you're on social media, you sort of see like being out there all the time, engaging here. And yeah, if you're an introvert or highly sensitive, that can be very draining because again, there's a lot of input, a lot of opinions, a lot of things happening. So, if you want to be, let's say, or if you're already there in social media and you're a highly sensitive or introvert, what are
Mhm.
some coping things that you've done or you recommend to really keep you in balance so that you don't feel, so depleted or, overwhelmed or start picking up a lot of people's energy from social media and then start doing those behaviors. So what can you do, if you are there or you want to be more engaged, but again, you want to sort of protect yourself?
Well, first, if you want to be more engaged, you should ask yourself what that looks like and ground yourself on your why. Because a lot of people go in with this plan to grow on social media, and that's like, if that's just the goal in itself, that's not a good goal because you're not grounded on your why. You're falling prey to the what the socialized goal is, right? Like my goal isn't to grow on social media. My goal is to try to create meaningful connections. And as somebody who likes to get to know people, like I get to know people, but I like to get to know people deeply. So I can be way too much for the people that don't want to talk about existentialism or life events or be vulnerable, right? Like I know that about people that are like, oh God, that's going to be too much. But for the people who resonate, they resonate. And I love social media because as somebody who is introverted, I don't actually do a lot of socializing outside of social media. So when I was in training, my whole social life was on YouTube, which I didn't have a YouTube channel, but I would engage in other people's YouTube communities. And I loved that. That's why I created a YouTube channel because I'm like, this is where people go when they want to have a community where you get to know the person on the YouTube channel. And mine's a little different because it's interviewing where the people I was following at the time, they had more vlog styles, but I also love Rich Roll. He's a fantastic person on YouTube. And I like YouTube and not so much podcasts for me because I like the visual, like as if you're sitting there and then you can communicate and chat. But TikTok is not for me. I learned that quickly. It's like way too overstimulating. Instagram, I was very hesitant to get on with my history of my eating disorder. I got on it to support a conference, and now I get on it to share more about the YouTube community. And I kind of notice like if I start scrolling too much, I don't feel well. Facebook is interesting because the algorithm, I don't see a whole lot of people, right? You kind of
Mhm.
just see your close people. And so I like that you kind of share meaningful content. I like your engagement and like the people that that you may or may not have met in person. I find it just meaningful conversations. So for me, it's trial and error and it's auditing the energy. It's like,
After. Mhm.
yeah, because like some social media, and I don't have a TV. I actually don't have a TV, and I don't. Interestingly, in 2020, had job insecurity, so I sold my condo and mostly everything in it, and I felt free. And that speaks to your environment. Like if you are cluttered and you're highly sensitive, like you're gonna know it. You're gonna know that things are cluttered. So having an open space and the colors matter. I have a red carpet, which is like contrary to what you're supposed to have in your house if you are in a red chair. I don't know.
Mhm.
But if I were to now redesign my home, it would be soothing colors. Like I love greens, like I love nature and the forest. So just checking in and seeing what emotions you're experiencing when you look at certain things in your house to say like, did I decorate this for my well-being or not? Did I decorate it because you're feeling fierce one day, and so you got that red carpet, right? Or this red chair.
Yeah, I think it's, really, trial and error. We may not know, but after you do that activity, you realize like, oh, I don't feel so good, or like I'm engaging in things I don't like after that was not helpful, and then you can realize like that's just not for me, and sort of try to eliminate it, and just really trying to stay true to you, and going back to why are you in social media? Do you just want to be viral and famous, and that's where it's coming from, and that's okay. There's people that want to do that, that's okay, but just really staying true to like what's the reason to be engaging in any platform. Is it, again, to have those things that fuel you as an introvert or highly sensitive, which is those connections, those deeper conversations, and you can still do that in social media, and not change to be something that you don't want to be or you're not. And I mean, for me, LinkedIn, I really like it. You can write long posts, they can be meaningful. You're interacting with a lot of different people, not just, physicians. And, I love that platform because of that. And, Twitter is just not really my thing. I can't really say a lot of stuff in 20 characters or whatever it is. I find it really like challenging. But again, we all have different ways to use social media for our needs. And also, you didn't talk about it, but I think it's important also to take that time, those breaks, because in social media, people sort of expect like you're always on, always on, always
Yeah.
posting. But it's so important just to disconnect. Like, who cares? Nobody cares. Turn it off, be off for a while, come back to it. Once you feel like energized, like it come from a good place that you want to be in, not just really dragging and trying to make it work. So I think it's important to take the time off of it and come back to it, and that's okay too.
Yeah, I have a very variable schedule on YouTube. On just if I were to force myself to post regularly, one, I find it hard to be scheduled creativity, right? Or if you meet somebody, I'm like, oh, I just want to talk to this person on YouTube. So for my own well-being, I had to take off all expectations that I was going to have a regular schedule, and I can tell when I've scheduled too many YouTube things in 1 month, right? I like have a number now that I'm like, okay, that number feels good where I can show up for each interview, feel completely myself and whole, and honor that guest. And you'll figure it out for you, and it will be different as you're saying, as certain life events. Like right now, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do after my fellowship. So currently, my life's a little bit more stressful outside of YouTube. But if I were to take a sabbatical, then I'll have more time to devote to YouTube, right? It's like you figure out, and some artists, they love Instagram where they can share their art, so it becomes an expressive outlet. Because when I was on Instagram to begin with, I'm like, what is this for? And then I realized a lot of artists really find it to be part of their own processing, and it was interesting to hear their feedback, and oh yeah, that really makes sense. So what works for you?
Hmm. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was, you know, being a kind of public speaker, at TEDx, you know, and now that, introverts are shy, but can you kind of share with others, if you feel like you're, introvert, and maybe you are a little even shy, how can you get to that point where, you can do a TED talk and, be seen by millions, thousands of people? Can you talk more about that process and what you did to maybe prepare, and even afterwards? Because not just even the talk, it's like afterwards, well, now you have to promote it, and people are seeing it, and what happens, with all those emotions, as that is happening.
Mine was a little easier because it was a studio talk. So if I get on stage, it'll be different, but I will share with you. The first thing, if you were going to do a TED talk, an introvert or extrovert, come in with your why, like so big that your why just says, I have to speak this out loud, right? Like, doesn't have to be. A lot of times when people are thinking outcomes, like these numbers, this goal that is a TEDx talk, and then like, okay, so if we're going to push ourselves, and this is what I've had to step back, because I had this inside burning that I needed to get this message out. And Susan Cain has a TED talk, The Power of Introverts. That's one I would recommend. And Brene Brown is introverted. So they had something compelling within them that they said, I need to get this to more people. And so I can't just get it to more people because, people are not reading as much these days. So I have to speak it. But if your why is so big that you just have to speak it, that's when introverts, not, as we were saying, social anxiety disorder, it's not really shyness. So we can speak on stage and then have your recharge and make sure that you've got your pre-stage routine that helps you to stay calm and energized, then give that talk and then have whatever you need to process it. But that would be the first thing I'd say is, what is the why? What's compelling you to want to give this talk? And then with that, you can overcome a lot of the anxiety because it will propel you to prepare.
Yeah, and I think, you've said it twice, it's so important, whether it's social media, whether it's a TED Talk, whatever you are doing is like understanding the why behind it. And that's huge because, when things get challenging, if your why is not strong, it'll just, just crumble, just stop, it won't last. And that is true too if you're an entrepreneur or, you're a coach, you have a coaching business, if your why is not strong, why are you doing things? When things get challenging, it's just much easier to just, not continue. So I think that's important because many times we don't really think about our own why. We are sort of pick up other people's whys or, piggyback on other people or want to be like other people and why they're doing it. So understanding our own true why and sitting down with it is really helpful. And as a coach,
I'm a big fan of Diana. Diana's a great lady. She's really good. I follow her. I'm a fan of her. I used to be, I used to be extrovert entirely, and then going to parties Friday. I can't wait to go to parties on Friday. All of a sudden, I got older, and then I became 180 degrees. I turned around and then became an introvert now. I go to parties and enjoy it, but I don't make an effort, big effort like before. I just quiet. One of the things, I have two children, son and a daughter. You know, I was very shy when I came to this country from India. So Diana, are you back? Okay.
Yep.
So I'm filling up for you, Diana.
You did a great
Okay.
job. And it's important.
thank
You
you.
brought up a good point, is that as we age, a lot of times people do become more introverted or just desire more alone time and downtime. So that would be a natural progression. And I appreciate you showcasing your experience.
Yeah, and thank you. We have a storm in California, so I think I froze. So hopefully I am back. And thank you for stepping in and helping. So I know you have a dog, Reese, and he's a big
Yes.
part of your life. And I think, one of the things that, I've read and even in the book, and I've seen that, one of the ways to recharge and to refuel is for a lot of introverts or highly sensitive people is to be around pets or dogs. So can you talk about that, how that has helped you? And did you know that before that was something going to be helpful for you? Did you always have pets? Was this something later? How did the pets come about for you?
Yeah, I had dogs growing up. I actually had a chocolate cocker spaniel named Jordan, and he passed away when he was 6 from a car. And his passing was devastating to me. I was very close to him, and it was like taking away my best friend that I then realized like he was part of a lot of my emotional processing. So once he was taken away, I struggled a lot. Um, and then I still always loved animals. I had small animals like guinea pigs, and we had another dog named Cody that lived a very long life. And then in dental school, I was feeling, I think it was loneliness. I had a super boyfriend who was fantastic, and I was looking at this dog, and he brought me to go see the dog, and he saw me with the dog, and he's like, "We're not leaving without this dog." So I actually have another dog named Simba, and he lives with my mom now, and they're very close. That happened. She had some issues with her heart when I was in dental school.
I think I lost you. Did you lose me? Oh no, this storm is crazy. Okay. Oh.
You're not frozen.
Okay. For the reason I stopped hearing it, I don't know if it was our storm and we lost it or not, but now
Can
I
you
can
hear?
hear you. Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So my other dog lives with my mom. And then I joined the Air Force, and of course with residency and oral surgery, we didn't have time for pets. I had a fish, and I just always loved animals. I think that's, besides from our really close friends, I could spend time with animals more than humans. And when I was in my second residency, oral medicine, I was still quite down. And the clinic said, you need to get a dog. And I was like, oh, I don't have enough time for a dog. But I put up this dog. It wasn't Reese, it was his brother, on my bulletin board in front of my desk, no, resident room. And I said, I want to get a dog like this to be our clinical, like a therapy dog for the clinic and the patients, because we had patients that a lot of them had cancer and were coming in for post-radiation or pre-radiation exams. And the clinic said, well, we need our therapy dog for the clinic. And I was like, oh, I'm not ready for a dog. So I waited a week and that dog was taken. And I was like, oh, shoot. I felt the emptiness in my heart. I'm like, darn it. But then I took Reese's photo and I put Reese up there. His name was Zeus at the time, which was funny because I also had a hamster named Hercules. That was a small one during that time. But I felt the sadness of not getting the other dog. So I got Reese that weekend. And that's the rest is history, so we say.
Yeah, I think it's so helpful because I think, dogs, animals, they give you like that unconditional love that maybe friends, parents, family may not, for whatever reason at times. And so it's always so recharging just to feel that exchange of energy that is kind of pure and loving and is distressful. And, your heart rate comes down and you just feel, less anxiety, and just more calm. And you're really present in the moment when you're with pets. So I think for anybody that is introvert or highly sensitive, this could be a great thing to have to just help, with coping and just feeling, a little more grounded. And I know you talked about, there's we have some dog
Yes.
friends. Yeah, those are just lovely, so cute. So I know you talked about, you know, finding your community, knowing your why, especially in social media or, if you're going to do a TED Talk, like really, just understanding your why. Pets, I know you also, nature is really important for you. What are other things, or maybe go more into nature and why that helps you that you can do or anybody can do, to really recharge, refuel, and just sort of stay grounded?
Well, nature is important for most humans, and I live in a very busy city. So the things that are detrimental are being in those big, busy cities, not finding nature, and you can bring nature into your home. So if you're feeling like, oh, well, I live in this busy city, the things that are going to be taking away from your energy are driving in it, being around that fast pace, thinking you need to continue to try to be type A. So I think it's first auditing your energy output, and then what are the things that do recharge you. So auditing your energy output could be like, well, how many times am I checking my phone? How many times am I on social media? Am I watching TV with the commercials? Do I have a red carpet? Right? Am I drinking a lot of caffeine? Am I around people whose energy is negative? It's auditing that throughout the day, because you might have developed this behavior where you're really not, you might be doing yourself strong disservice. I drank so much caffeine, horrible amounts of caffeine. I finally gave it up today. I'm like, oh, I feel so much better. Well, highly sensitive people are very sensitive to everything, including caffeine. Um, are you watching the news? If we like to be plugged in, but at what cost? Because watching war, watching the violence, well, if you're an empath, you want to heal that, you want to fix it. And if you can't, then what aspects of it can you do? What you need to release the energy, acknowledge it, and know what's yours and what you don't have power over in this moment. And I realize a lot of times when people feel that hopelessness, the helplessness, the suffering of the world, a lot of our artists, we think about like get into alcohol, get into drugs, get into have eating disorders, or take their own lives. So it's all about understanding what is taking your energy, how it's making you feel, and disengaging from the things that are really consuming a lot of that energy and making you feel in low moods, and having outlets to process, such as art, such as dancing. I know we both run and dance and move, finding what is authentic to you that helps you get that energy out. Because otherwise, if you internalize it, that turns into a lot of the mental health, physical health, spiritual health conditions. I don't know if it's disorders, but not wellness. And if you have, oftentimes people who are highly sensitive and introverted have a rich spiritual craving. So I'm not going to put any religious beliefs on anyone or spiritual beliefs, but like getting in tune with what that is for you and grounding yourself in that can be very helpful.
Yeah, and I know, you're a big runner, and, that is really helpful. I mean, if you believe in energy, we really learn, that empaths or highly sensitive, you pick up a lot of people. We're a little bit of sponges. But what exercise does, and it doesn't have to be running, but it's one form of exercise, but whatever works for you or is right for you, or tennis or whatever, like when you are exercising, breathing, you're really releasing all that energy out, and it's just coming off of you, so you don't like hold on to it. So I mean, that's why people feel much better after exercise, and it can be just as helpful as many antidepressants for a lot of people. Not saying that you should not have an antidepressant, but for a lot of people, just the act of exercise can raise their mood significantly to feel better. And again, a lot of it can be because you're kind of carrying other people's energy, emotions, fears, and when you release it, you just feel much better. So I think it's really important, to put exercise as part of like a routine that you do, especially when you start feeling a little bit low, that you realize like, just getting out there will be helpful. And then you talk about caffeine, and you're right. Many sensitive people, it's not just the emotions or the energy. It's like things that we drink, things that we consume, in our bodies, or even alcohol or caffeine. For me, for example, I can't have more than 2 cups. I get really jittery. I get really uncomfortable, and I don't even drink coffee anymore. But, it's just realizing just because everybody else drinks coffee, and in medicine, they drink 8 cups of coffee, doesn't mean you have to or you should, because you relate to it very differently. And again, that's not the majority. If you tell anybody I don't drink coffee, they think like you have 3 eyeballs. Especially as, my husband's Colombian, like, how can I drink coffee? Well, I don't like it, doesn't do good things in my body, so I don't want any of it, and that's okay. And just honoring that, and, cheering people that do like it and that helps them. But for me, for example, it's something like it doesn't help me, and I know that, and I'm okay with it. Um, and I think sometimes when we start realizing there are some things that are, after you do your audit and then you start incorporating some activities, some of these activities may be, different for people, or they maybe judge you. So how do you deal with sort of like the judgment of other people when you start changing your, activities, your things to do, the people you're hanging out with? How do you deal with that, or how do you help, even your clients as a coach, with those sort of transitions of when you are making some changes to environment, things you do, activities, because I think we start feeling sort of guilty, ashamed, and it can also spiral when we are making those changes.
Yeah, first things, when you start to set boundaries, you're going to piss people off. You're going to piss them off, because the people who are benefiting off of your lack of boundaries, they'll get pissed off. Allow them to be pissed off, because your lack of boundaries, what was that doing for you? And you choosing you, especially if you've been guilted and shamed into thinking you're the problem, it's going to take time, like getting into therapy to process that, being around people who are similar and can support you and can help you to see your attributes as gifts, so that you can start reframing if you've been going your whole life thinking that you are the problem. So it's kind of multi-layered. But what I've learned, and why I always preach authenticity, if you're highly sensitive, you know when you're not being authentic. Most people know when they're not being authentic, which I love The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. So you get physically ill. And if you're not living within your core values in medicine, there's so many things that go against the way that we want to heal. So oftentimes highly sensitive people will be the canaries in the coal mine. So you're like, why is everyone else looking like they're fine? Well, they're not fine. You're feeling it really deeply. So you might be the first one to be like, this is wrong. That doesn't mean you are the problem. That means that you probably have the capacity to point it out before others might be pointing it out. And part of being highly sensitive is noticing the subtleties before other people do, and feeling it so deeply that you can't help but kind of explode or implode depending on, your way of processing at the time. But for most of my life, I've people pleased, and I've done everything that other people told me I should do. And I was suicidal, and I was hating my life, and I felt lost, empty, worthless, devalued. And during undergrad, I was the most free I've ever been. I was doing things that were liberal arts, like philosophy, psychology, biology, of course. We studied gender studies, and I was running on my cross country and track team. And I look back at that time, it was like, I was completely me. I was holistically me. I didn't give a rat's behind, because it was the first time I was really free to do that. And then I started restricting back into what society told me to be, especially when I joined the military, follow all the rules, because I was such a good rule follower. I love the military, ironically. As a highly sensitive person, I thought I could heal the people that were in the war and, like, bring peace like Gandhi. That's not how it happened. But, I'm like, oh man, I'll just bring some peace into this war. But at this point in my life, it's just seeing the consequences of not being myself. And I just had Chelsea Turgeon on my channel, and she talked about she was living in alignment with what everyone wanted, and she felt the same way. We're like, well, we're following all the rules, and how is this working for us? So, like, what do I have to lose? And I'm fortunate to have the rock bottoms that were life-threatening, but also didn't learn from them at the time. Like, I've only learned now through developing self-compassion that I don't have to feel like poop every day, that, like, my life can have meaning and that my opinion matters. So it takes self-confidence, seeing your self-worth, knowing that your voice matters and that this is your life and taking back ownership of it. But then, like, people are going to have opinions about me either way. There's a whole lot of people that I can think, oh, well, you support me. You invited me here. Right. Thank you. Unless you hate me and you invited me here to mock me, which is also fine because I'm telling my truth. Right. But there will be people that hate me and that vibe with me either way. But if I'm not being me, the wrong people are going to be vibing with me. And I'm not, like, I'm going to feel so empty. And Brene Brown talks about, like, the opposite of belonging is fitting in. So, like, when I was striving so hard to fit in, I was so lonely. And being openly myself really brings people into my life that resonate. And I can really appreciate that sense of community in a way that brings life meaning and purpose. So it's like positive reinforcement, I think.
Yeah, the boundaries are huge, and I think we don't really learn that anywhere. And I think that's where the value of coaching can be, because it really kind of teach you that skill and kind of hold your hand as the process is happening when you're putting that boundary. And especially with the kryptonite for highly sensitive people or introverts, but they're definitely highly sensitive, is narcissists. And, they really just suck the life out of you as a, highly sensitive person. And sometimes they sort of kind of get attracted because they're trying to sort of take that energy as we give and as we feel the situation. But especially for narcissists, I mean, boundaries are huge, and it's really important to put them and to stand firm to them, because otherwise you just get totally plowed by them. And it may take days to recover from, like, an interaction with somebody who's a narcissist, especially if you're highly sensitive. And even for me, my mom is, and it would take me like 3 days to recover from, like, one interaction or one phone call. And then it just came to a point where I had to say, no more, like, no more. It's like, I can't do it. My well-being, my mental health, it's way more important. And even though people view it as, how can you not, be interacting and social with your mother because your mother and you're Latin, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, I just can't. It's just really draining for me. It affects how I then interact with my kids, with my family, because I feel like all this energy, and I just really can't. And it's like, it has to come to a point where you have to decide, love yourself first and take care of yourself, no matter what the society is going to say. And, I love my mom and I wish her the best. And, I don't want her to suffer, but I also don't want to be in the wrath of sort of her negativity and her, you know, um, trauma and all her stuff that she has. So it's like, I can love her afar and send her a lot of love and just wish her the best, but not have to be in the path of destruction. So, if it can be done with your own family, I mean, you can do that with coworkers or people that just are vampires or narcissists that don't really help you, and just really putting that firm boundary as they throw the tantrum that they don't like the boundary, but just staying true to it. Because at the end of the day, like you said, it's like, you want to feel connected, wholesome, and not drained or, out of place because you're people pleasing and not being yourself. So I think that's so important to really say, what are the consequences of not being true to you, of not putting those boundaries.
And recently, I've been told to medicate for my introversion pretty much and my highly sensitiveness in order to tolerate conditions that I don't think other people should be in either. And it it really impacted me. I've taken a long time to take in, these are the things that have been repeated. What is wrong with you? Like, I don't want to be, so I went and I interviewed at a place that has an open floor plan work environment where like little cubicles. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this would be my heck, right? Like this would be the opposite of what I would need. And I was in my head thinking, okay, how can I make this work? And then they're like, well, you can ask for accommodations. I'm like, man, I'm asking for accommodations when Adam Grant says that this open floor plan is actually not conducive to anybody's well-being or collaboration. And it's overstimulating and distracting, especially for people who are introverted. So just observing, there are many ways our education set up for extroverts, our, our, a lot of our workforce, it's like all this hustle and grind, and me speaking out against the hustle. And like, I thought I had to hustle to prove my worth. Well, me speaking out about it is going to get some people going to say, oh, because she's lazy, right? She's speaking out against the hustle because she's lazy. And like, we're hustling into this like place of just deathbed regrets, meaning that we are hustling. We don't actually know where we're going. And if we're craving some sort of peace and happiness, we're actually driving ourselves further and further away from what truly brings humans peace, happiness. It's the community, it's the love, it's slowing down and finding meaning and purpose in your life and grounding yourself on what truly matters to you.
Yeah, I mean that's so important to just separate that as like you're not the problem. Like, like you don't have to sort of change yourself because other people think like that's the way it should be. And again, maybe they're well-meaning, but it's like we get diagnosed, pathologized with things which is like, no, this is just how I perceive it, and it's just not a good environment for me. And you have to just realize like this is what I need, and not falling kind of into that, even though people again may not like it, may say X, Y, and Z. And going back to your point earlier, that people are going to say things about you no matter what, whether you do or whether you don't. People are going to say something. So just stay true to you, because otherwise, every time somebody says something like this, you're like, you're going to change and be like that. And then you're going to be like this. And then you're just going to be back and forth, not even knowing who you are at the end of the day. So people may not like it, but just really kind of even go back to your own why, like, what's important, like who's important, and you are important, like that self, whether people understand it or not, it's okay. Like people may not, but staying true to yourself. Yeah, this is really, really key, because, you know, the 80% of the people out there may experience life differently, and it's not a big deal for them. Having environments, having common offices, everybody in the same place, like they may not be worried about it or bother them, but for some people, it's like they need their own space to not be with so many people, distractions, people coming in, loud noises. We didn't talk about it too much earlier, but a lot of loud noises as well, temperatures, that can really be very, distracting or uncomfortable for people. Vacuum cleaners, even, loud lasers, a lot of things. For other people, it's not a big deal. I know for me, like my laser in surgery, we have this laser so loud, and to hear that for 3 hours, it drives me bananas. And finally had to say, like, give me the big laser. I don't want this little laser. I cannot hear for 3 hours. It just drives me crazy. So for me, it's like I had to say, because nobody else is going to bring it or care, because it doesn't bother them, but it bothers me. So it's like learning to say, this is what I need because this doesn't work, and just asking for it, and having people just, help you with that. And that's okay. Like, again, nobody else realizes it's a bother for them, but it is for me. So, noises, people, environments, crowded things, realizing your work environment, what works for you, and asking for that is really important.
And also just appreciating that people's opinions of you is a reflection of their own biases and their values. So if you're grounded on your values and you've heard your own beliefs and you work on those, then you can look at theirs and separate that, right? It's like if you tell me something, that I can get curious and say, well, what does that comment provide me an insight about your values and any beliefs that you have internalized, right? And then that gives me that space to then no longer absorb it, and I can learn from it. Like people can give me their opinions and we can take it and digest what we want from it and learn what we want from it and then spit out the rest, right? So it allows us to not close off, because if you're highly sensitive, you can be very sensitive to rejection and criticism. So in order to honor that, it's like hearing and then kind of processing through it with understanding that whatever they say is from their own lived experiences and their biases. And if you do have, there's sometimes you can have little earplugs that censor out some of the noise, but not all of it. So there's new little uh, adaptations that are out there. I've never tried them, but I've just keep seeing them on my ads. I think people really know that I can't stand my dog licking himself or doing anything. It drives me nuts. So I have a fan on at all times, because if I hear him, it drives me crazy. And then I feel bad because I'm like going crazy over a very natural process for him. But I'm like, it drives me bonkers. Every day drives me bonkers. I know he's gonna come in from the inside and lick himself, so I make sure the fan is on and it's going all day long. So that's how we work harmoniously together.
Yeah, I mean, see, these are like kind of, let's say, little silly things, but it's bothersome. I mean, like people like eating apples or crunching chips. I mean, that stuff drives me bananas, and like I have to just like leave the room for a little bit or ask people not to do it because it like there's something that in my body just goes like it's like chalk on the on the nails on the chalkboard. I don't like it, so it's like I don't want to get in a bad mood, but I just try to do activities to go around it, or ask people nicely, like that it's bothersome, or again remove myself from like the 5 minutes they're eating something and just let it be, and that's just is what it is. But just understanding that's something that can be triggering for you, and working with ways around it, whether it's technology or different things. And so I mean, if there's three things, I mean, I think we kind of touched up on them, but what are three things that you can leave for others that could be helpful, as a highly sensitive person, as an introvert, like what would you give advice for others, especially physicians? What can they do to recognize and to just kind of work with it, or things to do, for their everyday life?
Well, first I would, if they're identifying with a highly sensitive person and they haven't yet turned that into a gift, and a lot might come up for them as they realize, I had a lot of grief. I was like, oh man, all these things I changed because I thought I was the problem. I would first work on that narrative. Like, how have how have you been shown what that means in the world? Meaning, if you're a man in particular, that is, oftentimes being pressured to be more masculine, and therefore you think your sensitivity is a weakness and you have to show up a certain way. Or for me, being called way too sensitive and then having to armor up and be an oral surgeon. And like, so how did early perceptions of this trait impact how you've evolved over time in the narrative that you have? And if you've known you're highly sensitive, or you're uh, aligning with this now, I would audit your energy
Mm-hmm.
and say, after I engage in these, I just don't feel well. And then learn how to leverage it as strength. So oftentimes, as highly sensitive people, we mold ourselves to fit in. Introverts, highly sensitive people, we're molding ourselves in to fit into a world that's not made for introverts and highly sensitive people. And so if we're molding ourselves, we're abandoning our needs and wants. So observe where you do that and say, well, if I had a world that actually nurtured my highly sensitive traits and created a life that was conducive to being introverted. So I left a clinic and I went into work from home, which my mind had a lot of thoughts about. This was COVID related. So I was like, oh my God, who am I without being in the clinic all the time? And oh my goodness. I was like, oh my gosh, like I function so much better here. 2.5 years later, I'm like, oh my gosh, like people actually could work from home forever. Like they could actually get a job that they do that. But I didn't offer myself permission because I had a lot of judgment for my own worth associated with being in the clinic. And, RVUs and whatnot with productivity certainly played a role. So it's like, if you were to create a life that was actually conducive with your well-being, what would that look like? And then don't go blow up your life, to like change everything, but like small things, even if it's staying in your job. But a lot of the times when giving advice to people that are highly sensitive is like just creating these mini retreats within your day. Like if you're going to the bathroom to breathe, or do these things, these pauses to help you balance your energy and to really recharge throughout the day. And it doesn't have to be huge. As I said, it's just taking one small step. So if you can share with us what that is, because if you make it small and you can commit to it, and then that can compound over time, and you can finally realize, like, I don't have to feel bad. I can actually feel well and thrive and leverage the gifts that you've been given.
Yeah, I think the time audit so crucial, because you may not realize until you go through the day, of who you're talking to, what's in your environment, what are you drinking, that is really depleting you and you didn't realize, and what are you paying attention to? Because I think for me too was reading the news and picking up all the energy, then I felt so much fear, so much anxiety, so
Mm,
much like dread, like the world is ending,
yeah.
and because I was paying like every morning attention to that. And when I stopped doing that, it's like, oh, like so much stuff got so much better because I'm not paying attention to the anxiety and the fear and like everything's horrible. And, it's like I'm actually now spending time to read or spending time to, be quiet or meditate or pray, whatever it is. So when you change where you're putting your time and attention, like what you're feeling changes completely. And it doesn't have to change your life or your job or your family. It's just, well, what were you spending that time audit on, and you realize it and you change it. And it's a huge, huge difference. So really important. I don't think it should be understated how important it is to go through the activities you're doing, um, you know, time you're spending time with, on, or doing or not doing, can really make you feel very different. And just making some adjustments for the day.
Yeah. And it can be hard because social media is hard because it is designed to be addictive.
Mhm.
And so I actually felt like I was going through withdrawal as I was changing these things and recommitting like to the purpose of it and why we want to be so distracted in life. So give yourself grace and compassion because as you change it, it's like these have been created behaviors. It has a role in your life. And if you haven't developed some sort of grounding within yourself, well, these then become distractions to that. So working with a coach, working with a therapist, working with friends to really cultivate and process through what comes up, I'm a huge advocate for that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Jillian, we could probably talk for a long time, and because it's always a pleasure. You have so much to always share. It's so authentic and just raw, real, and just like a real human being, not a robot. And I just really appreciate that about you so much. And how can people find you? Because I know you are on social media, but what's the best place to reach you? Also, your YouTube channel. Tell them about them. Again, if you are a physician or just not physician, but you are looking for conversations that are deep and meaningful, again, you can find these communities, and these conversations that really can just change how you see life and really enrich your, like life, your soul, like how you feel. So how can they find you?
Yeah, if they want to come to the YouTube channel, you're on it. Christina's not on it yet. And people, I don't know the rest of the people here, but right now she needs to be on it. People can't tell that Christina Du is in the audience here, who is a lovely physician and light of our life. So we'll have to get on YouTube and you will find her a life true to you. So you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. That's a really great place to connect. And my other links are there as well. So we'll just mainly connect on LinkedIn. Tell me who you are, what you're searching for, and we will route you in the right direction.
Perfect. Well, yeah, please check her out. Jillian is a beautiful writer. So if you haven't read her writings, there's a lot of them in Kevin MD as well. But if not, like I said, her YouTube channel full of amazing things. And LinkedIn, social media platforms, reach out to her. If you want somebody also to coach you, she's a fantastic coach. But if not, just give you some ideas or where to go and how to connect to other amazing people. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for spending time with us, just trying to just normalize your character traits, realize there's nothing wrong with you, you're not broken, but just leveraging your day or time audits to just really keep you, engaged, refreshed, and not depleted. So, just share this if this was helpful. Next month, we're going to have a fantastic neurosurgeon, Dr. Eben Alexander, who is the author of 3 books, including Proof of Heaven, but he's been like on Oprah and everywhere. And he's really going to be talking about, how he went through a near-death experience with his really, severe bacterial meningitis that is, almost unheard of and, almost 99% fatal, but he survived, and sort of what happened through that process of his near-death experience, what happened after, and what insights he found through that experience. And I think it's going to be something that is, very different, but, being curious and open-minded about some things that we don't understand yet. And, just sort of the meaning of like why we're here, consciousness, what is the purpose of life, love, kind of deeper questions, but should be really engaging. So that's for next month. So check out on the physiciancoachsupport.com, the flyer, and you can sign up as well. And again, if you're a physician or you know somebody that can benefit from peer support, confidential one-on-one, check out our website, physiciancoachsupport.com. And thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful night.
Bye. Thank you.